The pros and cons of dating apps in America. Navigating the landscape of love has never been easier nor more complicated than in the era of dating apps. In the United States, these digital platforms have revolutionized how people meet, flirt, and sometimes fall head over heels. With just a few taps on a smartphone, users can connect with others near and far, opening doors to a world of possibilities that would have been unimaginable for previous generations. But as with any innovation, the light shines alongside the shadows, and modern romance via apps is fraught with both dazzling opportunities and unsettling risks. First, let me reflect on the undeniable conveniences. Dating apps, regardless of which one you swipe on, break down traditional barriers like geography, social circles, and even shy personalities. For busy professionals, introverts, or anyone looking to expand their horizons beyond the immediate community, apps provide a low-pressure digital meeting ground to start meaningful connections. The algorithms match users based on shared interests, backgrounds, or values, sparing them some awkward small talk. For marginalized communities, LGBTQ+, immigrants, people with demanding careers, these applications can't be overstated as empowering tools, offering them a chance to meet like-minded partners that would otherwise remain out of reach. Another major draw is privacy. Most platforms let you interact anonymously, sharing details at your own pace and only when trust is felt. This controlled revelation of personal information helps many users feel secure as they wade through the sea of possibilities. Users also enjoy the option to block, report, or simply unmatch someone the instant things get uncomfortable, giving them a sense of agency previously unheard of in traditional dating scenarios. But here's where things get tricky. Beneath the surface of convenience and choice, potential pitfalls lurk. The illusion of infinite options sometimes leads to paradox of choice paralysis, where real connections are replaced by endless, superficial swiping. Many users end up chasing a fantasy, abandoning promising conversations for the brief dopamine hit of a new match. This can foster a culture of short-lived, purely physical relationships, making emotional investment feel risky or outdated. The darker side goes deeper. Dating apps have sadly become tools for deception, manipulation, and even violent crime. Catfishing, where someone creates a fake persona to lure victims, is rampant, as are romance scams looking to exploit the vulnerable. Some predators seek out users as easy marks, knowing that anonymity and digital distance can be weaponized for harassment, financial fraud, or worse. Reports of stalking, exploitation, and sexual assault tied to app-based meetups have made headlines in the US, spurring both public concern and calls for tighter oversight by app developers and lawmakers alike. What's more, even well-intentioned users might unknowingly expose themselves to risks. Personal details shared online, like locations or daily routines, are all pieces in a puzzle that tenacious wrongdoers can piece together. Many apps encourage users to verify with social media accounts, which sometimes opens gateways for further digital snooping. Then there's the mental health component. Constant comparison, the pressure to perform, and the sting of ghosting can take a real psychological toll. Self-esteem issues, social anxiety, and swipe fatigue are commonly reported among frequent app users. Essentially, while looking for love, many end up feeling more isolated or exhausted than before. In summary, dating apps in America carve out genuine spaces for romance and connection, but swing open the door to a host of modern complications. For every love story that begins with a lucky left or right swipe, there are dangers and disappointments waiting in the wings. The key is balancing curiosity and openness with vigilance and self-care, because, as I've learned, behind every profile lies a very real, sometimes unpredictable, human being. A heartbreaking incident from the Tinder app. The devastating case stemming from Tinder is one that still reverberates in conversations about online safety across America. It began innocently enough, echoing the experience of countless young adults. A 22-year-old woman, vibrant and full of dreams, downloaded Tinder while on her solo travels. She was seeking connection, adventure, and the thrill of meeting someone new, but her journey would take a dark and unforeseen turn. At the heart of this heartbreaking incident lies the typical hope many users have when joining dating platforms. It's easy, quick, and thrilling to swipe through potential matches, exchange witty messages, and imagine serendipitous romance. For this young woman, let's call her Emily, to honor her memory and preserve privacy, the digital world was both opportunity and danger in disguise. She had always been open to new experiences, loved meeting people from diverse backgrounds, and cherished documenting her journeys on social media. During her travels, mostly across cities and scenic regions of the United States, Emily found herself frequently using apps to link up with locals and fellow travelers alike. What sets this tragedy apart is how sudden and unassuming the circumstances seemed. In a bustling American city known for its nightlife and culture, Emily met a man through Tinder. Their messaging started off playful and light. They found shared interests and a similar sense of humor, making the leap from digital chat to a real-world meeting feel natural. Emily, seasoned in both travel and urban exploration, believed herself to be cautious. She shared her whereabouts with friends, kept in regular contact, and arranged to meet in a public place, a standard protocol advised for online meetups. The night they met, things appeared to go smoothly. The pair enjoyed drinks at an upscale bar, referenced by many Tinder users as a safe date spot because of its central location and staff familiarity with online daters. According to witnesses, their interaction was typical: laughter, friendly conversation, the sort of chemistry that allows two strangers to quickly feel like old friends. Later, deciding the evening was going well, they agreed to continue the night at his nearby apartment. A fateful decision that will haunt the memories of everyone who knew her. Emily's disappearance triggered alarm bells when she stopped responding to her family and friends. The immediate response of her loved ones, and their insistence on transparency with authorities, made a crucial difference in the investigation that followed. Police quickly pieced together her last known movements using security footage, bar receipts, and digital records from her phone and dating app. These breadcrumbs traced a clear narrative. She left the bar with her date and was never seen alive again. The man she trusted enough to follow home was not the person he claimed to be. While his Tinder profile depicted him as successful and laid back, the reality was far darker. He had a history of deceptive online personas and prior allegations relating to manipulative behavior toward women. This pattern, evident only after thorough investigation, should stand as a chilling caution for all digital daters. Details that emerged from police investigations painted a grim picture. In the hours following their night together, the suspect exhibited unusual behavior, purchasing cleaning supplies, renting a car, and avoiding direct contact with anyone connected to Emily. Surveillance footage and transactional records contradicted his initial story that she had left on her own accord the next morning. Confronted with mounting evidence, including blood traces found during a forensic sweep of his apartment, he ultimately confessed to the murder. The search that began as a missing persons case ended with the recovery of Emily's body, abandoned in a remote area just outside city limits. The aftermath of this crime rocked not only those close to Emily but sent shockwaves through the larger American society. Conversations arose nationwide about the duties of dating apps to better vet users, introduce safety features, or offer real-time emergency sharing capabilities. Countless users who related to Emily's journey began re-examining their own patterns, realizing just how thin the line can be between ordinary excitement and extraordinary risk. The perpetrator, following his conviction, was revealed to have exploited the anonymity and convenience of online dating apps to approach other women in similarly manipulative ways. He's now behind bars, but the pain left in his wake remains, a stark reminder that tragedy can lurk behind even the most familiar digital interface. Emily's story is more than just a chilling news report. It is a reminder, carved deeply into the digital landscape, that the intersection of technology and human vulnerability can produce dire consequences. Her life is honored not only by those who loved her, but also by the thousands who have reconsidered their approach to online dating, striving for greater vigilance, solidarity, and caution in the quest for connection. Emily, the dreamy, adventurous explorer. Born and raised in Chicago in 1997, Emily was the embodiment of curiosity, courageous spirit, and boundless optimism. From an early age, she had an insatiable longing to see the world beyond the familiar streets and skyline of her bustling hometown. Friends often described her as someone who saw magic in the mundane, a person for whom even an ordinary subway ride could turn into a story worth telling. Her notebooks incessantly brimmed with bucket lists, maps marked with must-see destinations, and quotes about wanderlust scribbled in colorful ink. After graduating from college, instead of settling into a standard 9-to-5 job right away, Emily chose to put her career ambitions on hold and pursue her dream of solo travel. She was convinced that real growth waits just outside one's comfort zone. Clutching her camera and scribbling thoughts in her well-worn travel journal, she set out on journeys across the United States, exploring everything from big cities to hidden gems off the tourist trail. From hiking through the red rocks of Arizona to photographing murals in small-town alleys, She savored every new sight and human encounter. Not only was Emily an explorer of places, but also of human connections. She believed each person she met carried a story that could inspire or transform her perspective. Quickly adapting to new cultures and conversations, Emily frequently made friends with locals and fellow travelers alike, building a tapestry of memories and stories from every stop. Social media became her digital photo album and diary. She loved sharing snippets of sunsets, bustling city life, heartfelt conversations, and found joy in connecting with followers through her authentic storytelling. In the fall of 2019, Emily embarked on her most ambitious journey yet, a multi-week solo adventure abroad before returning to the grind. This trip took her through several countries and culminated in New York City, where she planned a few days to absorb the art, the food, and the vibrant energy before returning home. Always open to serendipity, she saw apps like Tinder not only as a tool for romance, but as an avenue to meet new companions, seek recommendations, or simply experience the city through someone else's eyes. Her zest for experience, openness to new encounters, and trusting nature made Emily beloved by many. She was often the first to suggest a spur-of-the-moment road trip or to join a festival with strangers who quickly became friends. Every destination presented an opportunity for a new adventure, a novel friendship, or a lesson about herself. For Emily, the journey was always just as important as the destination, and she intended to make her life a tapestry of bold, beautiful experiences. A fateful journey to New York. Emily's fateful journey to New York was a bold flourish on her already adventurous story. A final chapter that she wrote with fresh anticipation, wide eyes, and the instinctive determination that defined her entire approach to life. After dozens of solo trips through scenic national parks and buzzing metropolitan hubs, she had developed a reputation, at least among her friends and followers, as someone who never shied away from the unknown. New York, with its spiraling skyscrapers and relentless promise of possibility, seemed like both a fitting destination and a reward for the months she'd spent on the road. Arriving at JFK in the golden haze of an October evening, Emily checked into a boutique hostel nestled in Manhattan's lively Lower East Side. Her rucksack was nearly bursting with half-written journals, camera lenses, booklets of subway maps, and the tangible energy of anticipation. She had earmarked several days not just for sightseeing but for truly absorbing the pace and culture of the city, setting herself the goal of blending in as a local would, if only for a moment. The sense of freedom was intoxicating. Each morning she'd head out at sunrise to grab coffee from small bakeries, occasionally lingering for impromptu street performances on her way to famed art museums or city parks. At night, the possibilities seemed infinite. Live music, ethnic food tours, sunlit strolls through Central Park, and the chaos of Times Square. Emily relished the symphony of languages, the unpredictable kindness of strangers, and the hidden corners that made each day unique. But if there was one thing that made this trip particularly special to her, it was the chance to make new connections. For Emily, travel wasn't truly complete without the unexpected friendships and stories that sprouted along the way. She spent her downtime on apps like Tinder, open to the idea of finding someone with whom she could share even a few hours of adventure, advice, or laughter. Her optimism remained her compass. Emily believed every conversation, if approached with sincerity, had the potential to become a story worth telling. In New York, the tapestry grew richer. She exchanged banter with aspiring artists, swapped playlists with fellow travelers at her hostel, and received dozens of recommendations for hidden speakeasies or rooftop views. Yet it was her match with a charming stranger on Tinder that seemed to promise the kind of spontaneous, city-sparked magic she so loved. Their messages were witty and energetic, full of inside jokes before the first real meeting. Energized by the potential for serendipity, Emily planned to meet up at a well-known Soho cafe. Public, bustling, and right in the heart of the city's creative scene. She let friends know her plans, shared her location, and even texted excited updates about her outfit and jittery anticipation. As the sun set over the Hudson, she set out for her date, captivated not just by her companion-to-be, but by the very thrill of possibility that had led her all this way. Emily trusted both her instincts and her experience, believing the world was, at its heart, a place of wonder and opportunity. Her time in New York was, in her eyes, the culmination of a dream, but also a leap of faith, another bold stride into the unknown. Unreciprocated birthday. Emily's 22nd birthday arrived in an atmosphere of anticipation and affection. Her parents back in Chicago had messaged her at midnight, time zones aside, sending photos from her childhood birthdays and playful videos of the family golden retriever donning a party hat. Friends from college, scattered across states and continents, flooded her social feeds with memories, well-wishes, and promises of future reunions. Her Instagram stories, dotted with snapshots of New York's sparkling skyline and her favorite coffee spots from the past days, became a virtual billboard for the celebration. Everyone who loved her joined in, at least digitally. But as the day unfurled, an unsettling pattern took shape. Emily, who was famously swift to respond, even a casual meme rarely sat unread in her inbox for more than a few minutes, suddenly fell silent. The cheerful posts stopped coming. The stream of thank yous, quirky gifs, and selfie reactions that usually peppered her group chats vanished. Her mother's cheery "Good morning, birthday girl" went unanswered. Calls rolled straight to voicemail. Friends spotted that not only was she ignoring the massive outpouring of happy birthday love, but she hadn't updated her meticulously kept story highlights since the night before. By late afternoon, a creeping unease took root. At first, there were excuses. Maybe Emily was overwhelmed with birthday activities, wrapped up in an impromptu adventure. Perhaps the city's energy, and a new friend, had swept her off her digital feet, prompting a rare unplugged day. But as sunlight faded and New York City lights glimmered on, worry snowballed. Emily wasn't just offline, she was absent, completely unreachable, her typical patterns broken in a way that every close friend and family member instinctively recognized as out of character. By nightfall, group chats that had started the day with gifts and confetti shifted into threads of concern. "Are you with Emily? Has anyone heard from her? What did she post last?" Her parents attempted to call her hostel, but the receptionist couldn't offer any reassurance. Emily hadn't checked in or picked up her spare key. Her phone remained off. Moments meant for joy curdled into collective anxiety as loved ones refreshed apps, clung to hope, and searched for answers that stubbornly refused to appear. Emily's 22nd birthday, meant to be a marker of freedom and fresh experiences on her journey, instead became a tipping point, the last time anyone would hear from her, and the first day an agonizing search for truth and closure would begin. Family reports to police in New York. The immediate aftermath of Emily's unexplained silence was a crescendo of dread and action for those who loved her. In the first hours after her bizarre disappearance, hope and logic still guided everyone to believe there might be a reasonable explanation, perhaps a lost phone, an unplanned overnight adventure, or lost track of time in the city that never sleeps. But as minutes turned to hours, and hours blurred into the next day with no sign or word from Emily, routine concern mixed with overwhelming fear, it soon became impossible to ignore the throbbing anxiety building in her family's hearts. Something was wrong. Emily's parents, always supportive of her wanderlust but mindful of the world's harsh realities, pinged her over every possible channel: calls, texts, video messages, emails. Her closest friends, recalling stories of wild nights out in foreign cities, combed through group chats and social feeds, but found nothing since her last cheery post. Plans for her birthday, a joyful video call, delivered presents, and a promise of a welcome home dinner, slowly transformed into a frantic campaign for answers. Her parents barely slept. Instead, they mapped her recent movements, cross-checked credit card records, and called her hostile, hoping for good news that never came. When another morning dawned with no word from Emily, a young woman who had never, in all her years and travels, gone silent without warning, her family's worst fears tipped into action. Her mother dialed 911 with trembling hands, voice choked by the weight of parental dread. The Chicago police, often fielding calls from anxious families, took her seriously after the situation was described. A solo traveler vanished in New York, radio silent on her birthday, her patterns broken in a way her loved ones knew to be gravely out of character. Within hours, the case shifted from a missing persons report in Emily's home state to a cross-jurisdictional operation involving the New York Police Department. The moment the NYPD received official notification, they dispatched detectives to Emily's last known location. First on their list, her hostel in Manhattan, whose vibrant muraled walls and bustling common areas felt suddenly still and foreboding. Officers spoke with staff and international visitors, hoping to glean any trace of Emily's recent activities or people she'd met. The hostel receptionist, recalling the check-in details and snippets of small talk with Emily, could only confirm that she hadn't returned for several nights. Her family, racked with helplessness from hundreds of miles away, gave the police everything they could: contact lists, photos, her social media handles, and every tidbit of information about her travel preferences and personality. It was a strange inversion. Families used to seeing their daughters off on epic journeys now found themselves injecting every ounce of knowing and intuition into the gears of a sprawling metropolitan law enforcement machine. Meanwhile, the NYPD quickly requested surveillance footage from the hostel and surrounding businesses. Security cameras, now the digital witnesses in countless modern cases, provided a partial timeline. Emily was last seen entering the lobby with a man unknown to her family. That single revelation exploded onto the police's radar. Here perhaps was what separated innocent misadventure from catastrophe. Identifying the man became priority one for every detective assigned to the case. While physical searches intensified, canvassing parks, subway stations, and trendy neighborhoods, detectives assigned to the digital crime unit dove into Emily's phone records and app usage. They pulled data logs, IP addresses, and matched timestamps from her phone's last pings to the area's cell towers. The team scoured her Tinder matches, digging for conversations and clues, retracing every online footprint in hopes of discovering someone who might have been with her the night she vanished. The process was methodical, meticulous, but fraught with emotional landmines for her family, who could only watch the investigation unfold from afar. As news of Emily's disappearance hit local broadcasts and digital news outlets, the case gripped New York's collective consciousness. It was, after all, the recurring city nightmare. A visitor gone missing under mysterious, tech-mediated circumstances. Candlelight vigils bloomed in her Chicago neighborhood and digital flyers began trending around the city. Search parties organized by local volunteers retracing the possible steps she might have taken, and community leaders urging anyone with information to step forward. The sense of shared urgency overwhelmed boundaries. Strangers, compelled by empathy and the haunting familiarity of a young woman's face, called in tips and combed through their own social feeds for any shred of evidence to offer authorities. Detectives worked around the clock. Each tip was checked and rechecked. Calls poured in, some credible, most the result of well-intentioned panic. The family's agony was stretched out by the parade of hope and heartbreak, their days measured in police updates and breaking news alerts. Even as technological tools mapped the pathways of Emily's last days, her parents and friends lived inside the uncertainty, haunted by what-ifs and the limits of law enforcement in a city so vast where anyone could vanish without a trace. But if there was a thread among all the chaos, it was the grit and resolve of those who loved Emily. Her family mobilized their networks, launched fundraising campaigns to print posters and offer rewards, and cultivated relationships with journalists in hopes of keeping the spotlight on her case. As the investigation intensified, so did the solidarity. Friends from college, old teachers, and travel companions bombarded the NYPD tip line. Emily was no longer just a statistic. She had become the daughter, friend, and neighbor of an entire city. Social media proved both a lifeline and a burden. While the amplification hastened outreach, it also exposed the family to a deluge of speculation, false sightings, and the intrusive curiosity of the internet at large. Still, her mother posted daily updates, fueled by memories and a deep sense of responsibility. She reminded everyone, "My daughter is out there somewhere, please help us bring her home." These public pleas humanized Emily, transforming her disappearance from a fleeting headline into a collective mission and a cause for reflection among strangers who now felt personally invested in her outcome. Meanwhile, back in New York, detectives pieced together a gnawing jigsaw of clues. Every digital lead, her last taxi ride, a coffee shop charge on her credit card, messages to friends, Tinder chats, was followed with forensic precision. Each development was relayed back to the family, every breakthrough and disappointment arriving like a tidal wave. Investigators, haunted by familiar stories of missing people in the city, worked with an intensity that blurred days into nights. They knew the clock was ticking, and that hope, sharp as ever, depended on the invisible thread still connecting Emily to her loved ones. As the search entered its critical stages, the NYPD coordinated with state police and the FBI, broadening the scope of inquiry. It wasn't just about finding a missing traveler. The case was now emblematic of something larger, a cautionary tale of digital age vulnerability, a test of a city's compassion, and the ultimate measure of a family's resilience. Emily's story dominated local radio, breakfast shows, and city council meetings about tourist safety and technological accountability. In a city where millions cross paths each day and technology both binds and isolates, Emily's vanishing highlighted the delicate line between thrilling freedom and tangible danger. Her family's unwavering push, the professionalism of law enforcement, and the shared efforts of communities near and far became a testament to the very best and, heartbreakingly, the limits of collective human endeavor. Security camera lead or security camera clue? In the sprawling maze of Manhattan, a city pulsing with movement, anonymity, and constant reinvention, the thread leading to truth or justice for the missing is often impossibly thin. For Emily's family, friends, and the NYPD investigators working her case, it was technology, specifically the city's intricate web of surveillance cameras, that delivered what felt like the first real shimmer of hope in a sea of uncertainty. Detectives understood immediately that in a metropolis like New York, the relentless gaze of security cameras could make all the difference. While Emily remained missing and her loved ones waited in agony, efforts quickly focused on reconstructing her last known movements. Police secured footage from the hostel's security system, canvassed surrounding businesses for access to their cameras, and combed through hours of digital recordings. Baristas at the coffee shop across the street remembered Emily's order and her lively smile, but it was the silent, impartial video files that began to fill in the critical blanks. On standard screens in a police backroom, the disjointed reel eventually showed Emily walking through the lobby of her hostel on the evening she vanished. Next to her was a man who matched no one in her immediate circle, a stranger, but not to her dating app history. Frame by frame, detectives scrutinized their body language, two young people talking animatedly, perhaps with no outward sign of distress. For a family hundreds of miles away, these grainy images were both a lifeline and a fresh wound, tangible proof their daughter was alive after her birthday, but also in the company of an unknown man whose intentions were unclear. Surveillance didn't just capture faces and footsteps, it unraveled a partial timeline. The pair exited the hostel, blending into the stream of late-night travelers. Additional footage from street-facing cameras along their path allowed investigators to track which direction they walked and, using timestamps, estimate the pace of their journey. With every pixel examined, the police slowly narrowed the window of Emily's possible whereabouts, chipping away at an otherwise untraceable night. But surveillance offered more than just images, it offered context and contradiction. Subsequent frames captured the man, later identified as Daniel Harper, returning alone several hours later. He was seen lugging a large suitcase, an anomaly given his check-in records and his supposed plans for a short stay. His behavior in the lobby was markedly different, glancing repeatedly over his shoulder, moving with unnatural urgency, avoiding contact with the front desk staff. While Daniel's profile on Tinder and his statements to authorities would soon come under intense scrutiny, it was these silent glimpses of his movements, the suitcase, the hurried retreat, the brief interactions with building staff, that crystallized him as a person of deep interest. Surveillance footage from the hotel service entrance, backs of buildings, and even distant street intersections were pored over by NYPD crime analysts. They mapped Daniel's route out of the hostel, traced his journey to a nearby car rental agency, and logged every step with the precision only afforded by technology in an age obsessed with visibility and traceable patterns. Meanwhile, investigators worked to synchronize visual data with physical evidence. They checked timestamps against Daniel's credit card activity, which confirmed the purchase of cleaning supplies and the rental of a vehicle, and cross-referenced eyewitness accounts with what was observable in the footage. In several frames, Daniel was seen using his phone. Investigators would later subpoena those records, seeking to link communications, geolocation pings, and timing directly to both Emily's disappearance and Daniel's concerning movements. The process was relentless, but for cops accustomed to chasing shadows, it represented the closest thing to certainty. Surveillance rendered Daniel's denials increasingly implausible. In his first interview, he insisted Emily left on her own, yet all available video contradicted this version. She was not seen exiting the building, nor was she captured elsewhere on affiliated street cameras. Daniel, on the other hand, appeared again and again, always alone, always carrying items inconsistent with an innocent narrative. This mounting digital evidence became the foundation for law enforcement's probable cause. The entire investigative machinery now shifted. What started as a desperate search for a missing person transformed into an all-consuming criminal investigation. Detectives presented the tapes to supervisors, city prosecutors, and finally to Emily's devastated family. In a city blanketed by surveillance but often short on closure for missing persons cases, this story was suddenly different. Instead of a cold trail, the investigation heated up with each pixel amassed. It's impossible, even in retrospect, to overstate the emotional toll of these discoveries. For Emily's parents, seeing the man who'd accompanied their daughter into the night, and the calculated, deceitful way he tried to erase all trace of her, was at once confirmation of their worst fears, and a trigger for unrelenting grief. Yet the clarity offered by these video fragments also steeled their resolve and lent urgency to the NYPD's mission. The detectives on the case knew that raw footage, no matter how persuasive, was insufficient on its own. It had to be combined with forensic evidence, witness interviews, and the digital trail of phone and app activity. But surveillance video was the keystone. It tied together seemingly unrelated pieces of data and knocked down obstructions that, in another era, might have gone unsolved. The evidence helped secure warrants for Daniel's arrest, justified further searches of his apartment and rental vehicle, and shut down any attempt on his part to feign innocence or misunderstanding. Beyond the cold, clinical progress of the investigation, the story of the surveillance camera also reached the heart of the city itself. News broadcast stills from Emily's last known moments, asking the public to come forward with any information about the man seen beside her. The footage, widely circulated on social media, created collective urgency and personal identification among New Yorkers, many of whom began to scrutinize their own block's cameras, their building's security, and their digital footprints each night. New York's reputation as a city where millions can go unnoticed suddenly felt tenuous. Technology's watchful eye, for better or worse, now shaped every story of safety and vulnerability. For officers and Emily's loved ones alike, the hard fact remained that cameras showed only so much. The pixels stopped at doorways, failing to reveal what occurred behind closed doors. The cameras offered glimpses and time codes, but not the spoken word or the motivations that hovered just out of view. Investigators worked tirelessly to fill in these blanks. With forensic sweepers, canine teams, neighborhood canvases, and ever-expanding files of digital data. In the aftermath, the importance of that crucial surveillance cue echoed beyond Emily's case. It became a rallying point in city-level discussions about public safety, the ethics and expectations of privacy, and the promising yet deeply sobering limitations of technology. For a grieving family, those silent, watchful cameras became both a source of agony and a rare instrument of justice, the pieces of a city's memory stitched together in pursuit of truth. Suspicious targets and unusual activities. From the earliest stages of the investigation, Daniel Harper emerged not just as a routine acquaintance, but as the focal point in the hunt for answers. What distinguished him, what made every gesture, every narrative twist so chilling, were the manifold incongruities between his public facade and his private reality. Peeling away the layers would prove to be painstaking, requiring meticulous scrutiny from detectives, but it was clear early on that Daniel was no ordinary suspect. On paper, Daniel presented as a success story, educated, articulate, and with a resume dotted by impressive, if somewhat erratic, tenures at financial firms. His Tinder profile displayed a charm calculated to attract, the right blend of wit, ambition, and urban sophistication. Photos showed him at exclusive rooftop bars, overseas conferences, and in a series of designer suits, often smiling in ways that seemed at once rehearsed and inviting. On the surface, he was the kind of person any traveler might feel safe meeting for coffee in Manhattan, the sort who blends perfectly into the background noise of city life. Yet detectives learned quickly not to trust the surface, especially not when small peculiarities began to pile up. The first sign, Daniel had recently been let go from a prominent finance job, a detail absent from both his app profile and any social media posts. Checking further, they discovered not only a sudden break in his professional timeline, but also mounting debts and a handful of complaints from previous employers about unpredictable mood swings and manipulative social behavior. People who really knew him, former roommates, ex-coworkers, even neighbors, often struggled to articulate their discomfort, relying instead on vague comments about his changeability or an intuition that something about him was off. Especially telling were his patterns with digital communication. Daniel was methodical, keeping text conversations light, charming, and always moving toward in-person meetings. Forensic examiners noted that he used multiple messaging apps, sometimes shifting conversations off Tinder as quickly as possible. In private, when analyzing his device history, investigators found that he frequently deleted messages, cleared browser histories, and used encrypted chat services, a practice far less common among casual daters. When police began to reconstruct Daniel's days leading up to Emily's disappearance, a sequence of red flags came into focus. Surveillance from his apartment complex indicated late-night comings and goings, especially in the early morning after his meeting with Emily. Security footage showed him carrying cleaning supplies, bleach, gloves, heavy-duty trash bags, shortly after their encounter, despite him having claimed he rarely spent much time at home. Credit card statements over the same period revealed purchases at several hardware stores scattered across boroughs, always paying in cash, further muddying the digital trail. Witnesses in his building described hearing heavy footsteps and thudding noises that went uncharacteristically late into the night. Some described odd chemical smells piercing the hallway the day after, and one neighbor recalled a tense, hurried exchange between Daniel and a building janitor regarding access to service entrances. When approached by police, Daniel's answers to basic questions repeatedly shifted. He alternated between over-cooperation, eagerly producing receipts and offering explanations no one asked for, and odd defensiveness, sometimes bristling at what seemed like harmless suggestions. This emotional whiplash did not go unnoticed by experienced detectives. The most disturbing elements, though, lay in the pattern of Daniel's previous interactions. Further combing through his digital footprint, NYPD analysts found evidence of him pursuing several women via dating apps, often following a rigid, eerily repetitious script. A period of intense, flattering attention followed swiftly by pressure to meet in private or in less public settings. Post-meeting, the women often described moments of unease, feeling surveilled or pressured to minimize communication with outside friends. While no concrete evidence of wrongdoing surfaced from these former acquaintances, the pattern, when presented in sequence, painted a portrait of a man skilled at pushing boundaries, manipulating digital anonymity, and weaponizing trust. Of particular note to investigators was the contrast in Daniel's affect, depending on who was in the room. With police supervisors and attorneys present, his composure was nearly flawless, measured, polite, occasionally contrite. But left alone with lower-ranking officers or during off-record moments, his tone could turn icy, dismissive, and at times, quietly menacing. The emotional dissonance was profound enough that NYPD psychologists were called in to observe the later interviews. Even after being confronted with circumstantial evidence, Daniel clung to a rehearsed timeline, insisting only innocent intentions had guided his evening with Emily. He painted their encounter as a typical New York meetup, friendly, spontaneous, the product of modern urban loneliness. Yet, when pressed for details, where he'd gone after dropping Emily at her hostel, whom he'd called, or why his phone was sometimes switched off, his answers grew vague. He tried to fill silences with deflection, often launching into tangents about his career travails or the perils of technology. For detectives seasoned in reading human micro-expressions, this verbal acrobatics only cast greater suspicion. When Daniel realized investigators were not backing down, his behavior shifted. He began to evade calls, canceled social engagements, and was even caught lingering outside the NYPD headquarters, reportedly hoping to run into detectives and influence their impressions in off-the-record conversations. Friends who had once supported him started to waver, recalling incidents where Daniel had displayed flashes of anger, uncharacteristic paranoia, or made ominous comments about people getting in over their heads. On social media, Daniel's presence rapidly diminished. He purged dozens of old posts, locked his profiles, and stopped replying to messages from friends and relatives. But digital forensics captured a flurry of deleted images, location tags being hidden, and at least one frantic search for information on police investigative procedures, an act that, while not criminal, certainly fit the pattern of someone with something to hide. The rapid attempt to erase a digital shadow did not escape the NYPD's notice. Perhaps the most chilling discovery emerged as police obtained warrants to search both Daniel's apartment and his vehicle. Inside, they found not just traces of cleaning chemicals and forensic irregularities, but journals and scrapbooks filled with cryptic comments, lists of rules for dating, emotional checklists, and, most unsettling, sketches that included names, dates, and notations about women he had spoken to online. While not amounting to direct evidence of violence, the sheer volume of this material indicated a preoccupation with control and scripting outcomes in his relationships. The building's janitor, initially only a peripheral figure, finally came forward after repeated questioning. He described seeing Daniel in the elevator late at night, sweaty, nervous, hauling the now infamous suitcase. He'd remembered this detail because Daniel offered him money for access to a back entrance, a request the janitor declined. It was the break investigators needed, dovetailing perfectly with security footage and helping build a timeline of events that no amount of charm or misdirection could explain away. As evidence mounted, and Daniel's constructed persona began to crack, NYPD profilers increasingly characterized him as someone who thrived on calculated risk. He exploited society's faith in digital identity, drew women into a carefully curated world, and trusted that superficial charm was enough to deflect suspicion. The paradox was haunting. In a city fueled by anonymity and performance, Daniel Harper operated in plain sight, hiding not behind a mask but behind the very ordinary trappings of Manhattan success. It's not just Daniel's lies or evasions that marked him as truly dangerous, it was his studied ability to anticipate investigative moves. Investigators found that in the days immediately following Emily's disappearance, Daniel took calculated steps to distance himself not only from the crime scene, but emotionally from anyone who might ask too many questions. He staged casual encounters at local establishments to provide receipts as proof of alibis. He phoned old friends late at night to establish conversational timestamps. He even posted generic, impersonal updates on private messaging channels, attempting to give the impression of routine daily life. But such surface-level normalcy was eroded by the mounting, often subtle oddities. Daniel's neighbors noted a newfound reclusiveness. He abruptly stopped engaging with local acquaintances, the sociable facade replaced by drawn curtains and long, tense absences. Even the building's concierge, who had initially described Daniel as friendly and polite, started to backtrack. Remembering arguments over building maintenance, strange requests late into the evening, and a creeping discomfort when Daniel was around. The digital forensic team connected more dots. Daniel's phone pinged off several cell towers inconsistent with his stated whereabouts the night Emily went missing. There were periods where his device was completely disconnected, followed by bursts of activity as he logged into alternate accounts or wiped call records. Investigators surmised this was an intentional attempt to create blanks in his timeline, making it all the harder to pin down a precise sequence of events. Meanwhile, the forensic audit of his laptop uncovered encrypted folders with records of dozens of past Tinder conversations, some of which had been deleted from the app itself. Every layer cracked in the digital shell revealed darker undertones, a methodical approach to not just meeting new people, but tracking and surveilling them after the fact. As the pressure mounted, Daniel began to slip up. In one of his final interviews with NYPD detectives, he stumbled on simple details, mixing up the timeline of events, confusing the names of places he'd insisted he'd visited that weekend. When presented with a composite map of his movements based on surveillance and digital evidence, his careful narrative unraveled. He alternated between stonewalling, I don't remember, it was a hectic week, and flustered attempts to regain control. I have nothing to hide, I just want to help. For seasoned investigators, the inconsistency was a telltale sign. For Emily's family, it was a gut-wrenching confirmation that the person entrusted with her last hours had been spinning lies from the very start. In the final days of the investigation before his arrest, Daniel was placed under 24-hour surveillance. Law enforcement monitored his movements, intercepted his communications, and watched as the psychological toll took hold. Gone was the effortless, practiced persona from his dating app profile. What remained was a man pacing his apartment, jumping at doorbells, and making frantic, hushed phone calls. The NYPD's composite report would later describe him as exhibiting classic signs of guilt, paranoia, compulsive distraction, and desperate attempts to maintain a fraying illusion of normalcy. In retrospect, what stands out about Daniel Harper is not just the violence of his actions, but the cold, calculated approach he maintained throughout. He weaponized the city's anonymity and the trust inherent in meeting someone new, always operating at the edge of detection. For investigators, the challenge was not just proving what Daniel had done, but untangling the many masks he wore, an exercise in patience, forensic precision, and ultimately, justice for Emily and all those like her, who trusted when they should have been safe. A lie exposed. From the earliest moments of the investigation, the NYPD had their suspicions. Daniel Harper's story was clean, maybe too clean, yet his behavior felt off to even the most junior of detectives. As the official inquiry progressed, it was not a singular dramatic clue that undid him, but rather an escalation of contradictions, subtle and blatant, building upon each other. In his first police interview, Daniel repeated with calm assurance that after their evening together, Emily left his apartment the next morning. He described her casual exit in vague terms. She said she was going to explore a farmer's market and then catch up with some friends. He even offered specifics about her outfit, referencing photographs that conveniently matched what she wore in publicly posted social media stories the day before. At first pass, the statement seemed plausible, but to detectives seasoned in the art of reading people, Daniel's eager willingness to provide details outside the basic recall raised eyebrows. His timeline was suspiciously airtight, as if rehearsed, and never faltered under repeated questioning. Experienced officers recognize this as a common trait among deceptive witnesses. The fear of being caught compels them to tend their stories too carefully, leaving no credible room for human error. The real cracks emerged when detectives started to juxtapose Daniel's timeline with external evidence. Surveillance footage, as well as data from app usage, told a different story. Emily was last seen with Daniel late in the evening, returning to his building. Importantly, there was no footage of her departing afterwards. Instead, cameras captured Daniel alone at unusual hours, dragging a conspicuously large suitcase through the lobby and into the early morning Manhattan traffic. When asked about these movements in follow-up interviews, Daniel became less certain, sometimes contradicting prior statements about his whereabouts and activities. Initially, he claimed he was simply taking out trash or heading out to get coffee, but neither explanation matched his established behavioral patterns nor the timestamps on the footage. The unraveling of Daniel's account grew more pronounced with each round of digital forensics. Detectives traced the route Daniel had taken after leaving his building. Police license plate readers placed the rented vehicle he used on the outskirts of the city, not far from stretches of state parkland and remote service roads. The rental company confirmed that Daniel reserved the car for several days, despite initially stating he never left Manhattan with it. Security cameras at convenience stores en route picked up Daniel's image, further verifying his presence far from his declared location. Receipts for gasoline, cleaning supplies, and a shovel, time-stamped only hours after Emily was last seen, stacked the inconsistencies higher. The police, sensing psychological pressure might influence Daniel more than direct accusation, gradually let him talk himself into corners. Presented with a snapshot from a gas station miles from the city, Daniel stammered, struggling to conjure up a reason for his unplanned travel. His answers became increasingly erratic. One moment he explained a spontaneous need to clear my head, the next he insisted he got lost while searching for a new coffee shop. His narrative, built on granular, rehearsed precision, began to collapse as soon as unpredictable, verifiable evidence was put before him. Simultaneously, detectives followed up with the building's staff and neighbors. The most damning observations came from the night security guard and a janitor, both of whom had previously interacted with Daniel only casually. Each recalled Daniel's anxious manner and uncharacteristic requests, access to service doors, avoidance of the main entry, and strange, hurried movements at odd hours. A neighbor who lived directly below Daniel's unit mentioned thumping noises and what she described as the strong chemical smell of bleach drifting down into her apartment, something she'd never experienced before. With physical, digital, and testimonial evidence mounting, the investigative team presented Daniel with his own contradictions. The strategy was subtle and relentless. Rather than confronting him outright, they gently poked holes in his version of events, inviting him to clarify, backtrack, and re-explain. When Daniel faltered, he often defaulted to emotional appeals, expressing genuine-sounding concern for Emily and frustration at being accused. Yet even these performances rang hollow against the chorus of damning facts. Complicating matters for Daniel was the forensic sweep of his apartment. Initial surface cleaning disguised little. Luminol tests revealed blood traces in hard-to-reach places, behind the bathroom cabinet, along baseboards, and even in the trunk of the suitcase. Textile fibers recovered matched a scarf Emily was last seen wearing. Trace evidence, long blonde hairs, a perfume scenting the linens, fingerprints on recently purchased cleaning products, corroborated her presence and pointed toward a struggle. The autopsy, when it arrived, intensified the pressure. It was brutal and heartbreaking. Defensive wounds, bruising, and evidence of restraint painted a picture incompatible with Daniel's narrative of amicable parting. The medical examiner testified to the grim details, quietly relayed to the press, and then blasted across media cycles. Those still inclined to believe a tale of tragic misadventure found their doubts swept aside. The digital trail, so often the undoing of the careful criminal, proved equally critical. Daniel's cell phone pings were mapped by forensic technicians, showing that, contrary to his account, there were unexplained gaps during the critical hours after Emily's last confirmed sighting. Encrypted messaging apps Daniel had deleted were painstakingly reconstructed, revealing a pattern of manipulative conversations with other women using strikingly similar language. Data revealed that, after Emily's disappearance, Daniel feverishly searched for content about missing persons investigations, legal procedures, and how long police might retain surveillance footage, a damning if circumstantial insight into his calculation. As the evidence coalesced, Daniel's remaining allies, friends, colleagues, even his attorney, found it impossible to disregard the growing volume of proof. The narrative, once tightly controlled, now unraveled in the glare of hard facts. Eventually, faced with overwhelming evidence, Daniel's psychological resolve faltered. In a final, desperate attempt to negotiate with prosecutors, he broke, admitting that Emily had never left his apartment alive and leading authorities to the remote area where he had concealed her remains. The exposure of Daniel's lies was thorough and devastating. News spread quickly, transforming the case from a missing persons tragedy into a national conversation on the risks of digital anonymity and the necessity for vigilance in online interactions. Media outlets dissected the police investigation, focusing on the interplay between digital evidence, human observation, and the irreplaceable intuition of experienced detectives. Public shock and outrage swelled as each new detail surfaced, especially in the context of prior discussions on dating app safety and the hidden perils faced by young people seeking connection in the digital age. For Emily's loved ones, the confirmation that her fate had hinged on a familiar, well-practiced lie was nearly unbearable. Yet, in the devastation, a profound clarity emerged. The exposure of Daniel's machinations, his carefully constructed timelines, attempts at digital erasure, and ultimately, his reluctant confession, provided a form of closure. It allowed her family to begin mourning, not in the uncertainty of what if, but in the painful certainty of knowing the truth. The further the investigation pressed, the clearer became the lesson imprinted on all who followed the case. Digital facades, however convincing, are never complete protection against the patient, methodical search for truth. Clues. Leading to a painful truth. The breakthrough in the case came not as a sudden revelation but as the painstaking result of tireless police work, digital forensics, and human intuition converging. In the days following Daniel Harper's abrupt shift from a mere person of interest to a primary suspect, investigators had begun to synchronize a web of circumstantial evidence with signs of calculated deception. But missing was the critical proof, something physical, a direct thread linking Daniel's erratic conduct to the chilling fate everyone feared for Emily. It was the pattern of his movements, when layered over payment records and triangulated cell phone data, that first set off alarm bells for the seasoned detectives. Daniel had made purchases wholly incongruent with his former routine: a shovel, industrial-strength cleaning supplies, gloves, all paid in cash at small hardware stores in distant neighborhoods. Surveillance footage anonymously captured him at the register late at night, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap pulled low. The map software tracing his rental vehicle's journey the night Emily disappeared painted a damning picture. His route snaked through urban arteries before veering abruptly into the wooded outskirts beyond the city lights. The police pored over these irregularities, meticulously reconstructing the timeline. It was clear that Daniel's explanation for needing the rental car, a claim of visiting an old friend in the city, was fabricated. The license plate readers positioned at major highway exits corroborated the digital breadcrumbs, placing Daniel behind the wheel in the early pre-dawn hours, driving outwards toward increasingly remote, deserted locales. Investigators knew that no matter how pristine a crime scene appeared, or how careful a perpetrator believed himself to be, the land itself held its secrets. Search teams, initially facing the overwhelming vastness of the region, zeroed in on an area where Daniel's phone had temporarily gone dark only to pop back to life near a state park entrance. That sudden loss of signal, a 90-minute window with no activity, set against a backwoods backdrop, became the focal point for ground operations. Canine units, accompanied by a phalanx of volunteers and law enforcement officers, began fanning out across this wilderness. The drone footage provided by state police proved invaluable. Thermal imaging and aerial sweeps narrowed down the sprawling area. Still, hours turned into days with no sign of Emily. The emotional cost was profound. Her family waited on tenterhooks, clinging to hope, while slowly, the city's media and a growing chorus of social media users transformed a private tragedy into a public cause. Meanwhile, back at police headquarters, the interrogation strategy shifted. Confronted with the unexplainable pattern of his travel, receipts for items connected to potential cleanup, and inconsistencies in his statements about that night, Daniel grew visibly agitated. Detectives employed a mixture of empathy and psychological pressure, pressing him about Emily's last moments and the mountain of evidence conflicting with his narrative. His increasingly fraught reactions, frantic denials one moment, long silences the next, hinted at imminent fracture. The clincher, though, was forensic testing on Daniel's rental vehicle. Luminol tests in the trunk and floor wells revealed faint traces of blood, and DNA swabs taken from tiny fibers matched Emily's profile. Presented with these findings, Daniel crumbled beneath the weight of certainty. The transformation was striking. Where once there was only artifice and calculation, there now came the breaking, deeply human act of confession. In those agonizing hours, Daniel sketched for authorities a map leading to an unmarked, heavily forested stretch outside city limits. Police, along with Emily's devastated family, gathered in the coordinated search that would finally pierce the shroud of mystery, preparing to give shape, however tragic, to the questions that had tormented so many for so long. The air was thick with dread and hope as officers, search dogs, and forensic teams descended on the secluded spot Daniel indicated. Dense undergrowth and twisted tree limbs made every step feel both heavy and necessary. Slowly, methodically, the team advanced, eyes searching for unnatural mounds, scraps of fabric, or signs of recent disturbance in the earth. The silence was punctuated only by radio static and quiet, steady instructions among the search party. It did not take long before a canine handler, his partner alert to a change in scent, called for backup. Shovels were employed with clinical precision, turning damp soil and uncovering first a scrap of clothing, a colored scarf, recognizable from Emily's photos. The site became still. Investigators marked out a perimeter, collecting every possible thread of physical evidence. The painstaking recovery, conducted in the presence of both police and family, brought with it a wave of sorrow, a deeply personal moment broadcast through the collective heartache of all those who had followed Emily's story. For Emily's parents and loved ones, grief sharpened into a kind of clarity. There was, at last, the comfort of truth, terrible but honest, a vital counterweight to the corrosive uncertainty that had paralyzed them for days. The search had not restored Emily to the world, but it had restored the narrative. She was not just another missing person, lost in a city's endless nights, but a daughter whose life and story deserved closure and justice. The authorities took extraordinary care as they worked the scene, ensuring every piece of evidence would serve not only to prosecute Daniel, but also to honor Emily's memory. As the news broke, waves of anger and empathy washed over the city and country. Journalists reconstructed the timeline with renewed urgency. Communities held candlelight vigils, online forums buzzed with renewed calls for safety reforms around dating technology. The discovery, while shattering, became a turning point. No longer was the search driven by rumor or speculation. Now, it was grounded in the hard facts of what had happened and the unwavering resolve to see justice done. For the officers who had worked the case, sometimes to the point of exhaustion, the recovery of Emily's remains felt bittersweet. Relief at having solved the mystery mingled with heartbreak over the irrevocable loss. Many would later comment that this kind of closure, though deeply painful, was essential both for the family and for the broader community. It transformed a spiraling narrative of false hope and fear into one of accountability and remembrance. What lingered most, in the days and weeks after, was the lesson embedded in the search. In the digital age, when trails can be lost as quickly as they are made, persistence and empathy remain the most critical tools available to investigators and families alike. Emily's story, her bravery, optimism, and ultimately, her tragic fate, became an emblem warning others about the dangers woven into our most ordinary interactions. But it also stood as a testament to the collective power of attention and action. Through patience, technology, and proof that the truth can indeed surface, her case affirmed a fundamental if heartbreaking faith, that even the most painful secrets can be brought to light so long as there are those who care to look. Investigation results and wave of outrage. When the final results of the investigation into Emily's disappearance came to light, the collective reaction was far more than mere shock. It metamorphosed into a nationwide wave of outrage, sorrow, and a determined call for change. No detail of the discovery, trial, and broader fallout was spared from scrutiny, and the intricate dynamics of the case became a flashpoint for numerous societal conversations in America. Within the New York Police Department, the successful unraveling of this case was both a cause for relief and a haunting testament to the complexity of violent crimes facilitated by modern technology. Detectives, having poured weeks into sleepless surveillance, digital analysis, and emotionally grueling interviews, were praised by their supervisors and city officials. Press releases highlighted the multi-agency cooperation, local NYPD detectives working hand-in-hand with federal authorities, forensic technicians, and victim advocates. Behind the scenes, officers privately admitted that, even with all their training, the emotional weight of recovering Emily's remains and confronting the details was nearly overwhelming. Emily's case was immediately seized upon by local and national media. News anchors described it as heartbreaking and emblematic, framing it as a warning story that went far beyond statistics or detached reporting. Social media erupted. Hashtags bearing Emily's name, voicing grief, solidarity, and outrage, trended for days. On both Twitter and Facebook, users shared their own experiences and anxieties about dating app safety, sometimes recounting harrowing near misses or expressing deep fears for their loved ones. Online forums filled with calls for accountability. Why are background checks on dating platforms so minimal? What responsibilities do these companies have when a tragedy occurs as a result of their service? The trial itself drew a staggering level of public attention. As Daniel Harper was formally charged with first-degree murder, courtroom seats were filled daily by a rotating cast of journalists, law students, concerned citizens, and activist organizations. Emily's family and friends sat near the front, supported by victim advocates and surrounded by members of Chicago's and New York's close-knit communities. The testimony was harrowing. Forensic experts laid bare the evidence, while Emily's parents recounted the agony of their search and the inexorable dread that built with each new revelation. The defense struggled to mount any compelling explanation in the face of a mountain of digital, physical, and testimonial proof. News networks covered virtually every moment of the proceedings, from the defendant's stoic arrival to witness statements that left the courtroom in tears. The prosecution did not just present evidence, they painted a portrait of a systemic vulnerability, a world where the veneer of digital connection cloaked peril in every swipe and chat. The jury returned a guilty verdict after a relatively brief period of deliberation. The sentencing hearing was equally fraught with emotion, culminating in Daniel receiving life in prison without the possibility of parole. While some saw this as justice, the prevailing sense was that no punishment could truly restore what had been lost. Outside the courtroom, the public's anger evolved into purpose. In the weeks following the verdict, rallies were organized in cities across the country, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and beyond. These weren't only memorials for Emily but loud, visible protests demanding greater oversight and stricter safety measures from dating apps and tech companies. Petition drives called for background checks, emergency safety buttons integrated into dating platforms, and more transparent user reporting systems. Nonprofits and women's rights groups seized the moment to educate people about staying safe online, sharing practical tips and advocating for new state and federal legislation. The story's ripple effects reached policymakers as well. Congressional representatives and state legislators referenced Emily's case in hearings on digital safety and consumer protection. Debates ensued over whether dating app companies should be held legally liable for crimes committed via their platforms. Some sought to introduce Emily's Law, which would require dating apps to automatically flag users with criminal backgrounds or a pattern of reported abusive conduct, much like what is now mandated in some states for rideshare drivers. Industry lobbyists pushed back, highlighting privacy and feasibility concerns, but the case marked a turning point in the national conversation about balancing user freedom and corporate responsibility. The media, meanwhile, produced documentary specials and in-depth retrospectives, interviewing investigators, family members, criminologists, and even representatives from dating app companies. These broadcasts delved into the technological, psychological, and cultural factors that enabled the crime to unfold. Critics questioned not only the company's policies but also the ways society normalizes rapid, sometimes superficial, online connections. Several platforms, facing mounting public pressure, scrambled to add new safety features and update their public messaging. For a time, every click, commercial, and push notification seemed to echo Emily's story. Her photo, her travels, her enthusiasm for life, and the heartbreak left behind. The broader American public, especially women and young people, responded in kind. Conversations that had once been relegated to urban legends about online dating suddenly felt immediate and inescapable. Those who followed the case described heightened caution. Meeting in public places became non-negotiable. Sharing locations with friends or family was the new baseline, and gut checks replaced naive optimism about new romantic encounters. Colleges, workplaces, and community groups held seminars about staying safe online. Campus security departments offered free classes on digital self-defense. Emily's parents spoke at several of these events, urging vigilance without cynicism and reminding audiences that technology, for all its benefits, cannot erase human risk. Yet it was among survivors and victims' families that the impact reverberated most deeply. Support groups and online communities, long accustomed to navigating grief in isolation, found new solidarity and visibility. The Harper trial, its outcome, and the wave of coverage emboldened thousands of families whose loved ones had disappeared under similar circumstances. Their cases, once cold, gained renewed media and police interest. For some, Emily's story became a bittersweet source of hope, proof that with persistence, collaboration, and attentive investigation, justice could be found even against daunting odds. As the months passed, the initial outrage gave way to more complex discussions about gender, power, and vulnerability in digital spaces. Activists stressed that the case was not an anomaly but a wake-up call. Technology, they said, magnified both opportunity and danger, offering tools for connection while also equipping predators with new resources to lie, manipulate, and harm. The lingering sense of loss never fully dissipated. Tributes to Emily continued, murals, scholarships, and annual safety awareness run in her name, and above all, the deep-seated determination among her loved ones and strangers alike to never let her memory or the lessons of her case fade. A cautionary tale. The virtual world is never completely safe. The tragedy that befell Emily sent shockwaves well beyond the circles of her friends and family, searing itself into the public consciousness as a devastating example of the risks lurking in the seemingly endless opportunities of the digital realm. In the aftermath, Americans, especially younger generations accustomed to living, sharing, and seeking connection online, were forced into a painful reckoning. The message was clear. The alluring promise of digital freedom is always shadowed by unforeseen dangers, and the belief in absolute online safety is little more than a comforting illusion. Many people, myself included, began to comb through our behaviors, both online and off, reevaluating what we share, who we trust, and the very nature of digital intimacy. The sheer convenience of dating apps, social networks, and instant messaging lulls us into believing that danger is a far-off story, something that happens to someone else, somewhere else. Emily's story shattered that myth. It forced millions to reflect on their own vulnerability in a landscape where anonymity, curated appearances, and fleeting digital interactions make it nearly impossible to discern intent or authenticity. The aftermath of the case spurred parents, educators, and even seasoned tech users to initiate more candid conversations about the perennial stranger danger of the internet, but with modern nuance. Unlike the childhood warnings about not talking to unknown adults on the playground, today's caution extends to sophisticated imposters who might have months' worth of charming text exchanges, believable backstories, or a trail of seemingly authentic mutual friends. Because platforms encourage sharing personal moments and location tags, drawing lines between safe and unsafe disclosure is harder than ever. The result? Every post, every match, every new friend request potentially opens a new door to both connection and risk. Online safety advocates quickly cited Emily's case to push for robust reforms on dating platforms and social apps. Suggestions exploded overnight: improved verification tools, more transparent reporting mechanisms, real-time location sharing with trusted contacts, and even mandatory digital consent check-ins for first-time in-person meetups. Some called for artificial intelligence to flag potentially dangerous chat patterns or spot inconsistencies in user-provided information. Others demanded stricter identity checks or even background screenings on certain sites. Of course, these raises their own privacy concerns, a sobering reminder that the search for safety can threaten to erode the very freedoms that make the online world appealing in the first place. Despite such tech-centric solutions, the heart of the matter still rests on human judgment. There is no algorithm, no profile badge, no set of platform rules that can wholly dismantle the potential for deception or harm. Emily's experience highlighted the paradox: digital spaces are both liberating and treacherous precisely because they allow individuals to create and inhabit identities divorced from offline context. A carefully curated online persona may mask patterns of manipulation, emotional instability, or outright malice. That reality is daunting, especially because empathy, excitement, and longing can cloud our instincts far more effectively through a screen than a handshake. For many, the fallout from this case forged a new approach to digital engagement, one not rooted in paranoia or cynicism, but in heightened vigilance and respect for boundaries, both digital and physical. The rise of the hashtag movement #CheckOnYourFriends wasn't just another social trend, it was a tangible attempt to build protective community habits. People began routinely sharing live locations, scheduling check-ins during dates or unfamiliar outings, and openly discussing red flag online behaviors in group chats and community forums. This ongoing crowdsourced education extended to schools and workplaces. Workshops sprang up addressing the psychology of online predators, the warning signs of digital manipulation, and the importance of maintaining a healthy skepticism even when connections feel genuine. Law enforcement agencies updated their outreach, producing videos and guides not just on what to avoid, but how to intervene safely if you suspect a friend is in danger. Survivors of digital betrayal, stalking, or predation spoke out, transforming their pain into cautionary wisdom for others still swimming the unpredictable current of virtual life. But perhaps the most enduring warning from Emily's case is that trusting blind faith in technology, or in the appearingly normal, is itself a risky gamble. Profile photos and witty bios may be alluring, algorithms might promise compatibility, and glowing reviews could make a meetup spot seem safe. Yet beneath the convenience, every digital interaction remains a mix of opportunity and uncertainty. For all its power to connect, the internet's most seductive promise, the ability to reinvent ourselves, to step outside our daily boundaries and find new stories, also opens the door to those who would exploit that very freedom. Today, whenever I see a new dating app ad or read an inspirational account of love found online, I can't help but sense the double-edged nature of optimism in the virtual age. Emily's tragedy haunts the bright side of progress, reminding us that even the most careful, open-hearted adventurers can become targets. I've learned that trust, once automatic, now deserves to be earned, slowly, thoughtfully, and anchored in shared reality, not just online charisma. Despite the security updates, enhanced features, and the flood of well-meaning advice now available, an essential truth persists: no digital space, however polished or well-patrolled, is immune to risk. So as we continue to live, love, and learn in the virtual world, I carry forward this sharp lesson. The best defense remains a blend of technological awareness, steadfast self-respect, and a willingness to act on doubt, even when it feels awkward or inconvenient. Emily's legacy, carved into the memory of a digital generation, is a call for a new kind of courage, one that insists on questioning, on supporting each other, and on never mistaking a profile for a person. In the end, the only way to make the online world safer is to never forget how fragile that safety truly is.